I mean,
It's a
actually,
nice
the right wing like us better. Right, go on.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Real Media podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Barlow, and my co-host is Cam Sandhu, the editor-in-chief of Real Media. I'm senior editor at Real Media. Today our guest is Lisa McKenzie, a working class academic, of which we've just been having quite a heated discussion about the meaning of what that is. And today's discussion is going to be a little bit more freewheeling and less focused on specifics of particular campaigns and campaign tactics, but probably more on shared experiences and stories about life and political positions. So this will be slightly different from some of the other ones where we're focusing on single issue campaigns and methods of organising, but I think it will be more than fruitful and at least interesting, if nothing else. So yeah, I'm just wondering whether, Cam, you can start off with a question, because I've got plenty of questions, but I know Lisa quite well, so I'm just wondering if you can kick us off with something we were chatting about.
Might as well kind of talk about what we were just talking about, why you call yourself a working class academic and why you think that's important to present yourself in that way.
I mean, I work at the London School of Economics, so calling myself a working class academic in such an elite space, for me, it's a real political act, because people like me, particularly working class women, and particularly from deindustrialised pit villages where I come from, don't normally end up at the LSE. So for me, it's really important that I call myself a working class academic, because what I'm doing with that is saying that working class people from pit villages, women, what we can do is we can read books. We can get a PhD, we can do a degree. And does that mean we've got to leave our roots behind? Does that mean that we've got to be something different than our mothers? No. It means that I can take my working classness, my culture and my pride into what is usually a hostile space. You know, education, the arts, politics, the media, are usually very hostile spaces towards working class people, which is why we have to have Real Media. Yeah. Because normally we don't get in. You know, I don't really get in the BBC, and when you do, you get closed down very quickly. So for me, that concept of being working class and an academic mostly blows people's minds. They think, oh my God, you can't be both. It's an oxymoron. You can't be an academic and working class. Yeah. Surely you're now middle class.
Well, do people expect you to leave that working class bit behind?
Of course.
Once you've...
Well, I don't just expect it. They think that I've got no choice in it. I mean, this is the other thing about being working class. It's almost, we working class people are thought to have no choice where they're positioned because they are being positioned. It's, we're not positioning ourselves. So somebody else gets to decide who we are, what we like, the things, our politics, and they get to decide and they get to tell other people about us. That's why for me it's really important being a working class academic, especially one, I'm an ethnographer. I do research with working class communities. So I get to tell our stories. And that for me is a highly political act. I'm not leaving it to the middle class to tell our stories, to tell, what is happening in our communities. I'm doing it myself. That's really important for any sort of political organisation. But for also other working class people to see, you don't have to leave who you are behind.
Yeah, it was interesting though. We had just beforehand someone contributed and said, not from this country, and the idea of class. For instance, in America, Bernie Sanders is talking about the middle class and middle class jobs, and what he means is what we would consider working class, right? People who work in factories and stuff like that, which is quite confusing. But also people of our generation, I think of the millennial generation.
That's not my generation.
Yeah, I know. So us, the hosts, and maybe our viewers.
I'm a Thatcher's child.
Yeah, I mean, I was born during the Falklands War, but and I remember Thatcher, but.
Who doesn't remember those brilliant days?
Yeah, that was glorious. But the idea of what is it? We're also Blair's Thatcher's child, and we're Blair's children and Thatcher's children, and the idea that there is no such thing as society, there is no such thing as a working class identity. It was crushed. A lot of working class playwrights and musicians and things like that sort of get crushed. The money's drawn away from them, but also the idea that Oasis, for instance, say were a working class band, or
Yeah.
like were they or weren't they? You know, suddenly.
Well, they were.
Yeah, but but a lot of people wouldn't recognise that. You know, a lot of people wouldn't.
No, they do.
Maybe
No.
with Oasis, maybe
Come
that's
on,
a bad choice.
well, I
But
mean,
what, Radiohead, you know, or you know.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with Oasis in particular, you know, the great anthems of the working class man in the pub, you know, is Wonderwall. You know, people love to sing it when, you know, these connect with people.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, it is important that working class people get to tell our own stories. We get to hear who we are and get to hear, you know, things that represent us in our own language, in our own voices.
But but for an outsider, an alien, or someone from different, not even
An
just
alien.
different country, yeah, from a different planet, because the working class is global, right? Really,
Yes,
right?
the working class is global.
It is global,
yeah.
right? And so it's not just saying this is what working class is to an American, but actually to someone who's not from this planet, doesn't know. You know, like a lot of us don't really know what this idea of working class is now, because the water got muddied. And as we were talking about off camera as well, both the left and the right can be quite disdainful of the working class. But what is the working class?
Well,
nobody, to you, or
the concept, look, class as a concept, working class people, it's a political concept. So, you know, the Labour Party now can't say class. You know, class can't come out of their mouths. They're always talking to working people. You know, they're never talking to working class people, because the concept of class is about struggle, and it's about power, and it's about the relationships in power. So that's why talking about class is important, because you can't just talk about working class people. You have to also talk about middle class people, because there's a relationship there. There's a power relationship. And in any society, whether we're in India, whether we're in the UK, whether in the US, there are people that are unfairly and unjustly benefiting from a system. And at the same time, there are people who are unfairly and unjustly being penalised by that system as well. So, you know, for me, I would call those, you know, unearned advantages and disadvantages. So middle class people, and I know this because I work in education, game a system. They know how to game that system. So if we're going to talk about class, it's the relationship between classes. So you can't not talk about it. You know, and obviously the middle class and those that can game a system and those that do well out of a system, of course they're not going to want to talk about it because they're doing all right out of it. So we have to normalise behaviour. You know, behaviour has caused inequalities, and this is what's happened really over the last 30 years, is class struggle has been reduced to individualised behaviour, individualised failure, rather than a shared power struggle within groups of people. And I'm an internationalist, so I know that class struggle is an international pursuit, not a British one. Yeah. You know, we've got an international elite. You know, we're in London today. They are here. The international elite are here and making sure that, you know, that they're doing all right.
Yeah, but just to, I'm going to hammer this in point one last time, and then we'll start talking about maybe poor doors and renters' rights and other things like that. But I guess maybe I'm talking from a quite personal perspective, but I get this a lot from a lot of my friends. And my friend, she's a sociology teacher for high school kids, and they cannot tell you, we're talking like kids in the poorest areas of Greater Manchester, cannot tell you what class they come from. They don't know. Yeah. They don't even know what a class is. And I grew up in a sort of a mining village that had gone to pot, but we actually had a factory, so the job still stayed and we're okay. But, you know, I went to uni. And I ditched my accent, my regional accent, as quickly as I could, to fit in.
You didn't, because you've got a regional accent.
Have I? Right. Okay. I thought
you might think you did, but you didn't.
I thought I'd snuck through.
Class is much deeper.
Yeah.
Class is the way we hold ourselves. Class is the way we speak. The language that we speak. I don't know still whether you borrow or lend off somebody. I still don't know what that is. Doesn't mean that I haven't got a PhD, because I have. You know, these are things, we judge each other on minutiae. Yeah. And actually the big and important things are left to one side.
So how do you tell the person like me who's grown up in a mining town, but it's not a mining town any longer, not everyone works in the same place, and there's not like that community built around the same workplace any longer, or like a kid in Gorton or North Manchester, you know, you're working class, and this is what being working class is. I mean, what do you say?
Well, look, class was never about work, really, anyway. It's always been about power. It's always about power relationships in society. So that's how... And it's not surprising that working class kids in poor neighbourhoods don't know what class is. Why would they? Who's going to talk to them about that? Who's ever going to explain that to them? You know, the only thing we've got now in the UK is this fake and false concept of social mobility. That a few of us, the good ones, the ones that can sort of, you know, be middle class, can get cherry-picked out our communities, perhaps go to university, which again is a falsehood, because there are universities and universities. So the local university that used to be a poly is not Oxford or Cambridge or the LSE. So again, there's lots of sort of myths around social mobility and what people can achieve, and also what does achievement mean. I was in Parliament a couple of weeks ago at a select committee, and the select committee, I kid you not, are thinking about ways that they can help the working class. And they're thinking one of the ways that they can, because apparently the working class have fallen so behind, now, that they need a tick box. So working class people, and particularly white working class people, have become so problematic in society, they need a tick box. And
what are we talking about here in terms of a tick box? Like
it's a protected category. So like race, ethnicity, disability, and gender, a protected category. So when you go for your job or whatever, you have to tick your tick box. Well, they're thinking now whether you need one to be white and working class. You need to have a tick box. And I sat in that parliamentary review, and I said to them, you're looking at the wrong people. Because you're looking at, you know, why are white working class people doing so badly? Well, actually, what you're not looking at is why the class system is so ingrained that, you know, this is a relationship between two. Look at the middle class. Look at the way that they game the system. Look at the way that they unfairly get advantages that actually, you know, that don't belong to them. And, you know, they just kind of washed over that. Because what they wanted to do is talk about the working class and their failure.
Yeah, and as victims, I guess,
rather
than
as failure.
Rather than as oppressed or
as being part of a system that is. I mean, it's not just oppressed. We need the language of exploitation because this is exploitation. You know, I've been recently up in the old mining towns where I'm from Nottinghamshire and in Derbyshire. You know, these are systems of exploitation now. Sports Direct, slum landlords, payday loans. These are systems of exploitation. People are exploiting the poor and the labour of the poor and the misery of the poor. Yeah. And it's an exploitation now. So, you know, we need to go beyond sort of inequality or this is exploitation. This is downright exploitation.
Just to say that, in 2014, the government's own report into was it the Child Social Mobility Unit found that Britain was so elitist it could be classed as social engineering. And, you know, that social mobility has in fact been undone, the work that's been done over the last few years, so it's not happening at all. Yeah.
Social mobility stopped, but the facade and the lie of it continues. And it continues with it is about individual behaviour and not the structure.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've got to be honest about that. So it's not surprising that people don't know which class they belong to because it serves them to not know. Because you ain't got someone like me with my big gob talking about, you know, exploitation. You know, obviously this is not something that, you know, people want to hear. What they want to hear is if you work really hard and if you do really well, you'll get somewhere in life.
Yeah, I mean, I find that actually in popular culture, musically and stuff, there's a lot of talk about getting ahead by yourself. The individual is the hero, and all responsibility for your own failings are on you.
Yeah.
Or for the things that happen to you are on you, and all your successes are down to you as well.
Yeah,
so everyone who succeeded through all the advantages that they had, well, that was just hard work. But and if you've not succeeded, it's because you don't work hard enough. Yet you were talking to us off camera about Sports Direct. You can't clock in until it's a 4-mile long factory. You have to walk.
I mean, people are under. I mean, just think about this. People have security checks. A personal security check before they go to work, before they get to their place of work, and then when they leave. Dehumanising processes. These are dehumanising processes of people who are earning minimum wage and less. Mike Ashley was recently the owner of Sports Direct. He was hauled in front of Parliament and questioned, why are your workers being paid less than the minimum wage? He said, I don't know. He genuinely said he didn't know. Yeah. He didn't know. But the thing is, somebody in that company knew, and this was a system of exploitation. It was purposeful.
I guess there's a kind of common thread coming through some of the stuff that you're saying, which is essentially that we're looking, and I do lots of work around welfare, and the kind of reason that poverty porn exists is to reaffirm that the fault is on the person themselves. It's not documentary, it's not journalism, it's entertainment, and it's playing off poor people against one another. And in 2014 they found that people had hardened their feelings towards welfare because they believe it's an individual failure rather than austerity, which has happened.
You're right,
to all of us.
And especially around poverty porn, which has almost been kind of propaganda. It's almost like a part of a propaganda machine, which is saying that the poor, it's their failure. There's something about them personally, something about their behaviour, something about the things that they do or they don't do, which is the reason why they're on benefits, which is the reason why they're on welfare. So this is obviously it's not popular to say what I'm saying because it's difficult. I'm not. It's difficult. It's difficult to say. Unfortunately, you by your one can't. You can't change a system that's absolutely against you, and it's really unpopular for somebody like me to say to the middle class, and you've got it a bit easier. I mean, I was talking to somebody last week. Do you know the troubled families policy?
No, what's that?
The Tories, it was about 4 years ago, it's been really controversial actually. It's called Troubled Families. So the Tories decided that they were, I think it's like 200,000 troubled families in the UK. And they needed, they needed help because it was their fault. So these were families who were allegedly, so poverty-stricken because of their own behaviour that they needed help. So they needed intervention. And I was saying, well, perhaps we need an entitled families policy, where workers go into middle-class homes and say, look, you know what, you've had enough. Stop taking so much. Stop being greedy. But it's never, the focus is always on one end and never on the other. Yeah. And this is why, why I'm saying it's not popular, it's problematic.
Yeah. So talking about these issues, how do we make a change? How do we create change? What kind of campaigns or organisations should we look to be part of? How do we work together? I mean, what kind of things do you think are best?
I mean, that's the whole point, working together. That is what we need to be doing, because we've got to get beyond this idea that the individual can fight all on their own. What ends up happening is individuals get sick and ill and end up stop fighting because they can't take the onslaught. So working together, fighting together, finding causes, small causes to start with in local communities that you can win. Things that you can win that brings people together. This is where I've always started. My dad was. I didn't actually start with a small campaign. My dad was a striking miner in Nottingham. You know, we were taking the government down. So we didn't actually start with a small campaign. But, you know, I've been part of many, many campaigns. And I think we were talking earlier about what's successful. Well, for me, every campaign is successful. Every campaign. Because it means that somebody has come together with other people and they've said, do you know what, this is not right. And there's been some sort of, I don't know, enlightenment feeling within groups of people that have said this is not right. That's always a positive first step. You know, I'll be honest, you very rarely win against capitalist power because it's powerful. But but that doesn't mean it's not successful.
The act of bringing people together, the act of realising that you know you can do something. But you know, I mean, I hear
it gives people confidence as well.
Yeah, but I do hear like small union organising strategies are like, you know, go into a workplace, find out what people want. Oh, they want a vending machine in the break room or something like that, and get that off management, and you win. Everyone's like, okay, cool. We should, maybe we could, maybe we could actually not have to clock in and out on our breaks or when we go to the toilet, you know, and a way of like freeing ourselves up from being dehumanised in two ways. One, you're winning, concessions, but secondly, you're working with other people to get that.
Yeah,
know?
I mean, what a sad state we're in though, where people are now back in a position where they're having to form trade unions for basic rights. I mean, we had these rights. These rights. It's not that we fought for the. This is why being working class is important, and this is why we should identify and talk about being working class, because our working class ancestors fought for these rights, and over generations and generations those rights have been eroded. So these are fights and struggles we have won in the past. And so really what a shame now that we're in that position where people are having to come together and say, is it right that we should be clocking in and clocking out when we go to the toilet?
Yeah, and and again, you said you've been up in the mining towns. I mean, could you give us a couple of examples of the kind of work that people are doing, in those areas now? Because I know a bit myself because I used to work at CAT before I got out at Caterpillar. That was, but what's it like? What does it seem like to you?
Do you know? I mean, I'm going to be really honest here. The campaigns that are happening in these small towns are they're pretty non-existent. Things are not. People don't have the energy. They're fighting PIP assessments. They're fighting against a government that is starving them out, and so all their fight really is an individual fight in order to survive and exist. And actually, what I would say is, we need small campaigns just to support each other. Some of the best campaigns, I'll be honest, that I've come across are independent food banks. I mean, and this is about the basics, making sure people have got food. Independent that are saying to the DWP, we're going to feed anybody. You don't need a ticket from the job centre. You don't need an assessment from the DWP before we'll feed you. And actually there's small independent food banks being set up that are saying we'll feed anybody. And they are under a tremendous pressure actually from local authorities. The local authorities want those closed.
Yeah, they.
And so actually the best forms of solidarity that I see up there is that basic care, that people go, you know what, today we need to make sure that each other's fed. Today we need to make sure that the old guy up the road has not died and nobody's known. And so these are really small community campaigns that are happening, and I see those as very successful. Actually, I see those as really successful. I've been part of campaigns here in London, which has been big. I've been part of very successful campaigns, but it's these everyday struggles of people that are just trying to stop each other from dying, really. I mean, these are successful campaigns. That's what I would say to anybody who wants, the struggle starts with your next door neighbour. It starts in your community.
But it's interesting that you bring up that community. One of the things, so when I first went to uni, a guy said to me, a Marxist, said to me, he said, "You're doing what a lot of working class intellectuals have done in the recent years, which is come to uni." I moved to Manchester from Leicester, and I stayed, you know, and because, well, partially because my family was there, but partially because I didn't want to live where I came from. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't easy round there, and
I don't blame you, Leicester.
Hey,
I'm from Nottingham.
Yeah, I know, mate. Let's not get into that. You know, and I know I'm not the only one. What you pointed out is that, especially under the Blair era, and the idea of expanding people going to uni, and then also the idea of people being able to choose the careers they want. So it's all on them. So they have to move to the cities, which are hubs for those careers. Is that all the sort of the fighters and the intellectuals move to the university towns and they stay there, and then it leaves a lot of places bereft of leaders and leadership. And then what you get is
I'm an anarchist, so I'm not into
no.
leaders.
Well, this is what he was saying. He said leaders and leadership, but certainly I certainly see like a certain set of people have moved out. Maybe, you know. And maybe I don't know whether you find that to be true or not. I mean, how do you find it?
Lots of people have moved out. People are always moving around. That's the truth. People move around. But lots of people stay as well. Yeah. And you know, rather than and that's why one of the biggest criticisms that I get as a working class campaigner or working class whatever is that people say they're fed up of people coming from the outside trying to organise them. They're sick of it. You know, there's some communities been bloody organised almost to death by outsiders trying to come in. And so for me, I'm really, I am a working class anarchist as well as a working class academic. So for me, it's about grassroots. It's about mutual aid with each other. And also it's about a recognition of that class struggle. And other people from the outside, they can support, but they shouldn't be organising people. They should be supporting what's already there. And like I said, I've seen all over the Midlands independent food banks opening up. These are great starts because it's a space. And one of the things that we are short of is space. You go to any of these mining towns, their community centres have closed down, their welfares have closed down, they're short of space. So actually being able to use space to get people together is a first start. You've got to have first steps. Yeah. We can't attack Parliament if we don't know who the next door neighbour is. So sometimes it's just really simple stuff. Yeah.
But so how did the people in the metropolitan cities, the big metropolitan cities, how do they, sometimes there's such a churn and such a movement of people within those cities and stuff, it's very hard to, one, organise at a local level, but two, to support people in the rest of the country, or to even think about that, other than, as you say, parachuting in and trying to organise people is very difficult. So what do you think people can do if they're like, you live in a big city, you've got,
well, we shouldn't automatically assume that everybody living in a big city is all right as well. Yeah. Because, like I said, I've been in London for 4 years, and I have seen some of the worst things happen to working class people in this city. Social cleansing, being removed, not being allowed to live where your whole family is. Rents going sky high, and somebody literally telling you are not worth the land that you live on. So let's not pretend that something, that this is not happening in our cities as well. Mm-hmm. This is why we don't need to talk about class, because it's working class people in the cities who are being moved out. It's working class people in the cities that that you had on earlier, who are riding bikes for Deliveroo and not being paid the minimum wage. So, we need to think, do we need to be thinking about, geography in that kind of way? Perhaps we should be thinking about, social geography and what we have in common with each other. Yeah. That's why I suppose I do a lot of campaign. I pick the campaigns that I do, I'll be honest, based on class struggle. I give my support to working class people. So in London at the moment, I'm supporting the LSE cleaners, who are they work for the London School of Economics, but they don't work for the London School of Economics. They are cleaners that have been their contracts have been they work for a third party, so they're actually not LSE cleaners. You know, they work for a different company, which means that they don't get the same rights as everybody else that works for the London School of Economics. So I'm supporting their cause, and because these are working class people that are fighting for something really basic, which is the right to be seen as equal. So, you know, other campaigns I've been part of, the Poor Doors, which was just down the road from here.
We're in Whitechapel, by the way, listeners and
we're in
viewers.
Whitechapel, so, you know, there's buildings that started to spring up all over London, I believe in Manchester as well, and Liverpool, that in order to get planning permission, the developers has had to put so many units of social housing. But obviously the people that live in the social housing are not good enough to walk into the same door as the people that live in the private housing. So the developers have put 2 doors in these buildings. One is at the front with carpet and a concierge and a nice lift. The other one is at the back with no carpet, no concierge and not a nice lift. And we called those the Poor Doors. You know, I was part of that campaign for 2 years. We didn't close those doors down, which is what we wanted to, but what we did is we made the bigger political argument that people are not worth more or less because of the wealth that they've got. And, you know, making people walk around the back is you know, that's not about equality. That's about saying to somebody, you are just not good enough to walk in that front door. You know, we should have left this behind with bloody Downton Abbey, but we didn't. And so for me, the success of that campaign was to make that argument that walking in a front door has got a symbolic effect on that whole community.
Cam, do you have any questions?
I was going to say that the Poor Doors, I think it was in Southwark, the Haygate estate, and they had suggested creating a second doorway because they didn't want to meet the provisions of social housing. And housing and gentrification is actually a really big area where you see this divide between who's allowed. And you were saying about the rights, and Lend-Lease, who were involved there, are now involved in Haringey. And it's, you know, I don't know if people kind of see the reality of it. As you were saying, people don't get to tell these stories that they have told, we have no right to return. They're going to demolish our building.
They're not worth. I mean, this is what we've got to put this down to, is if we're being really honest here, the people that live there are not worth the land they live on. This is what local councils believe. This is what obviously national governments believe as well. This is what developers believe.
Absolutely.
You know, that actually the people there are just not worth it. Go and live on cheaper land. And I'll tell you where they're being moved up to, the old mining towns in the Midlands and the North. Because I've been up there recently and I am tracking people that are being moved out of Barking and Dagenham, moved out of Ealing, and the local councils are paying the private landlords in these communities in the north, they're paying their deposits. So this is social cleansing. This is the thing that apparently is not supposed to be happening. This is happening. And the reason is because the people who are poorer in this country are not worth the land, this rich, wealthy, innovative land in London. They're not worth it. So they need to go. They need to go and live somewhere that's cheaper. And these are rational arguments that you can hear everywhere.
Yeah, they don't actually hide them much, do they?
They don't hide them, no.
There's a documentary on the West End estate, which we did a short film about, and there was a guy...
I was part of that campaign.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He was like, are they causing you any trouble? And he's talking about the tenants that he's kicking out, giving them an awful price for their flat to build 2,000 luxury flats. And they can't house 500 social housing tenants.
Yeah, and I remember that guy in there said, you know, I love my new flat so much. This was one of the private tenants. You know, I'm going to buy another one. He wasn't happy with having a brand new penthouse apartment on the ruins of somebody's council estate. He wanted 2 of them.
And this is the point, right? They're sitting empty. So we've got a problem with social housing, but there's luxury flats being built that are going to sit empty.
Yeah, and actually here in Whitechapel, there are thousands and thousands of luxury flats being built, and they will sit empty. Now and there is a relationship there, a direct relationship with the thousands and thousands of people who are homeless. Yeah. And we have to and that's why all along I say we cannot just focus on one thing. We've actually got to look at both ends because there is a direct relationship.
Yeah, because actually, just to mention a couple of things, Martin, who's a mutual friend of ours, was showing me around Whitechapel when about 2009, when these big blocks of flats were starting to sprout out from the city City of London outwards? Is that what we're near? Yeah. And the flats were worth £3 million, and people have been cleared off that land, but they were sitting there empty. They're being bought as land banks. They're being bought as places to just store money.
Well, actually, there are properties in this area that they sold off plan, so they're bought before they're even built, and then they've been bought and sold another twice before they're even built. Yeah. Because if you've got a property in London, you leave it a year or 2 years, you've made 20, 30 grand, 50 grand. Yeah. You don't have to do anything. Yeah. For people that enjoy this type of wealth accumulation, it's great. Yeah. It's great, but it is coming at the cost of people who have got nowhere to live, and we can't pretend that it isn't. Yeah. We need to stop lying about, well, not even lying, but accept that it's bloody wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, and those arguments aren't being made in the media, and we lose that. I was wondering whether we could turn to the topic a little bit. There was the by-election in Stoke recently, and I saw that you'd mentioned a couple of things about it. One of the things I thought was really interesting is that you said no one's talking about the large amount of people who didn't vote.
No.
Everyone's trying to count votes for, for this side or that side and try and draw a sort of idea. But, of course, it's Labour councils that are clearing people out of London, and it's Labour councils that run Manchester, for instance, for 35 years.
Nottingham, they run Nottingham Council. This is I suppose this is the problem of of a parliamentary system, is that there are places that become absolute safe seats for political parties. Unfortunately, Labour voters have traditionally been working class, which means the Labour Party represent poorer people. Unfortunately, again, here in London, it's Labour councils that are making people. They argue that they're not, and they say that they're not social cleansing, but actually they are. I mean, you know from the Haygate. From the Aylesbury estate. Yeah. These are Labour councils that are rationalising this practice, and they're saying, well, we're short of money because of austerity. Like, austerity is some sort of thing that happened, not that it's actually a purposeful policy, and now we don't have the money, so obviously the rational thing is to sell some of our land, to get some revenue in. And so, working class people in these communities, why should they vote Labour? Yeah. Why should they vote Labour? Why should they vote for the for the politicians in their area? Because remember, people don't think on a national level. They think about where they're from, and they think about their own lives. So why would they vote for politicians that they know are either at best ignoring them, and at worst, harming them? So, we can't actually, I have no blame for people who don't want to vote, because, if you've got a choice of, and this is going back to Stoke, working class people up in the north would rather stick pins in their eyes than vote for the Tories. But can they vote for Labour? Can they vote for a party that has been there for sort of 20, 30 years in these safe seats, but working class people in these communities have sit and watched their lifestyle, their children's lifestyle, just being wrecked.
Yeah. Just wondering if you've got any.
No.
I think I've talked you to death.
No.
No, it's been lovely.
No, yeah, it's been super interesting, and we off camera we introduced you to Tina Louise, who's been doing a lot of work in fracking. But you're talking about be an interesting place to leave it. I think is talking a little bit about fracking in Nottinghamshire, because it can explain what the problems are in Nottinghamshire and generally in a lot of places, why it's difficult to build resistance to fracking in those areas. You know.
Well, I suppose, what happened particularly in the old mining towns is we had the strike and then we had the pit closures. At the same time as the pit closures, which was late 80s, early 90s, is a lot of the factories got closed down as well. So I think it was 91 that Marks and Spencer's changed their policy and said that rather than make everything sort of British, we'd be more competitive. So what they started to do is tender out, to countries all over the world rather than make things in Nottinghamshire, in Leicestershire, in Yorkshire. So at the same time, you got this double whammy. So you got the industrial employers closing, but then you also got the factories. Like my mum worked for Pretty Polly making tights. I worked at Pretty Polly making tights. All my friends at school worked in, a hosiery industry making tights. We were making the knickers and the underwear, for the whole of Britain in these areas. Now, they all closed within 4 years of each other. So what happened is these communities got decimated very quickly. So jobs went, people's lifestyles went. Remember, these were places where people relatively were earning, decent money. They'd fought for these rights for generations. And overnight, these things went. And then what happened is the jobs were not just there for that generation. They were not there for future generations either. So you did get people leaving, but also you got people remaining with little hope. And so this is I suppose the situation in these old deindustrialised areas is they were left hopeless and rudderless for a long, long time. 10 years ago, places like Sports Direct, Amazon, Boohoo, started moving in with this system of exploitation. And so the people there wanted the jobs. The local councils, opened up all sorts of enterprise zones, gave all sorts of, sort of tidbits for companies to come in and set businesses up. And the consequence of that now is that, people fear unemployment. People fear living in poverty because, they've tasted it. And so what's happened really is, the frackers have moved in. They've promised people jobs. They've promised people investments. It's very difficult, to argue with a community that, wants to see their kids in a job and they don't want to see their kids leave.
Yeah.
It's hard to say we don't want that.
Yeah. Of course, though, we do want that. The thing is, as we were saying, it's like the government's going to spend 35 billion to secure about 5,000 jobs. They included in that list sex workers and cafeteria workers, but most of the jobs come from skilled workers from other places in the world anyway, and they only last a couple of years because you set up the thing, you sod off. So you'd be better off, saying, look, we spend the 36 billion on building long-term good jobs.
We need good long-term investment in our communities that actually are about building on the industries that we've had in the past. We let those skills go. I know women up in Nottinghamshire that my mum was one of them. You'd take her a bit of fabric, you'd have a new dress to go out in. These skills have they've let them go. My dad, he knows about keeping the lights on, he knows about energy. My dad is a clean, he absolutely wants clean energy.
Yeah.
He understands this.
Yeah, and that's one of the misnomers. Again, it's something I've noticed Labour politicians and union bureaucrats say on behalf of miners and stuff like that. No, we need to get jobs. We'll do they want dirty energy jobs. But as I was saying to you, we was up in Bassett Law in Nottinghamshire, and a guy who's a foreman in a mine was the first person to come down to the protest site and say they absolutely shouldn't do this here. He says it's the longest running aquifer in the country, feeds 7 million people with water. You know, and I know I've been down there. We need to stop digging it out, spend the money on renewable energy.
We call it dirty jobs. I mean, you know, that these dirty energy and clean energy, and you know, I think we've got to get rid of that language as well, because you know what that's done to mining communities by calling you've called them dirty.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not, these are not good words to use. That, oh, when you worked down the pit, you did dirty jobs. Well, you know what my dad will tell you? I know I bloody did. I was down there. You know, I was a kid growing up in these communities. I know what pit dust did to us.
Yeah.
You know, we know. So, you know, we need, I mean, I am absolutely, you know, I want renewable energy. I don't want this clean renewable. I just want renewable energy. You know, my dad sits there all day and he'll tell you, you know, why should he be paying electricity? He could have, you know, tiles on his roof that you know, he's interested in all of this because he's a miner and he understands that energy is important. You know, and there's thousands and thousands of ex-miners and miners' families that actually understand this at a deeper level than probably, you know, I'm sounding like a proper northerner now, but, you know, anybody from London.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think now. So, yeah, there's been some provocation, some freewheeling discussion here. I'm just wondering if you've got any last thoughts on, practically, for anyone at home who's listening to this thinking, OK, right, we've got to think about class, we've got to work together, we've got to get out there, we've got to do something, you know, to make a change, you know. What would you suggest as the first starting steps? I mean, maybe it's different for every person, but I don't know.
Different, and it is different in different communities as well. So here in London, you know, there's a real threat about people being made homeless. You know, estate demolition is a real problem here. So, you know, forming groups and sometimes having to fight against your local councillors. What a terrible thing you've got to do, but you've got to do it. So, you know, here in London, the immediate fight is the right to exist in London. You know, so that's about getting together, forming groups, you know, talking to each other about, you know, where you live, you know, and who's in that area. Then you know, up in the mining towns, up in the north, you know, it's basic stuff now. You know, making sure that you're all there's something for people to eat. You know, why I just feel so angry and so sad that we're at a point in history where the basic things of, you know, that you need a home and you need something to eat, that we are having to make these fights again. And I think, you know, if we recognise that this is the fight that we've got, you know, and the only way we can do this is looking after each other, that's where you start. Mm-hmm. You know, you start by, you know, meeting other people where you live. I tell you, you know, a lot of people, they dismiss sort of Twitter activism. I don't, actually. I don't. You know, I don't dismiss social media activism because I know that some people can't get out. You know, I know that in some of the mining communities, people are isolated. You know, if they can form an online community, there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, there's lots of people who are part of DPAC, Disabled People Against Cuts, you know, that have got activist groups over social media. So for me, it's just about linking up, join up. Yeah. You know, whether, you know, sometimes it's in person and sometimes it's not. Yeah. But, you know, I'm not, you know, that the only good protest is the one on the street with an angry fist. That's not who I'm not, that's not me.
So get together. Okay, cool. Right, I think on that note, thank you, Lisa. Hopefully we'll have you back again. And thank you, viewers and listeners of this. This is the Real Media Podcast. I'm Thomas Barlow. This is Cam Sandu. And that was Lisa McKenzie. Thank you very much. Cheers and goodbye. Are we good?
We're all looking around.
Yeah, I know. It's great TV.